Now staying with transport issues, Gauteng Roads and Transport MEC Jacob Mamabolo has released a report into the underlying conflict, violence as well as fatalities within the taxi industry. The report says that the industry is controlled by unregulated associations that have become a law unto themselves. He joins us now to take us through these findings. A very good evening to you, MEC. Thank you very much for your time. I've just touched now on one of the key findings that came out of the report. And before we go into the other details, tell us more about these unregistered associations. Who are they and how have they been allowed to exist and flourish to this extent?
Firstly, thank you very much. Good evening to you, to all the viewers. Once more, thanks for the opportunity. Let me just, before coming straight to your point, confirm that yes, we have received and finally released a very important report on the root causes of taxi violence in the province of Gauteng. The report clearly indicates, with respect to the business model of the taxi associations, that the current act, which is the National Land Transport Act, in its entirety, does not really tend to regulate or say anything about activities and operations of taxi associations. But the report in the commission has clearly demonstrated beyond any doubt that actually these associations constitute an 80% factor in the running of taxi associations. There are many of them which are not registered. They are operating illegally, including taxi operators that operate under them. They do have registered members, non-registered members, and in the same associations. We have also seen in the report that part of the problem with the business model is just how money is collected. There are squads that are stationed at different routes, at taxi ranks, collecting money in some instances at gunpoint from operators. The money is not accounted for. Also, when time for elections come, those who are benefiting from illegal activities of money collection, and of course the privileges that goes with the leadership positions, don't want to leave those positions. And the whole issue of the fact that taxi associations also moonlight as corporate entities, as commercial and business entities, when they're supposed to be non-profit organizations that purely promote interests of members, but they also double up as running commercial activities. So from that point, yes, in our province, we do, and the report does say it very clearly, that over the years, there has been a pattern of the taxi industry and the taxi associations just being law unto themselves. And this is a historic problem that we are now going to address, and we are now going to make sure that we deal with it.
One of the challenges that I foresee here, MEC, is trying to unroot what has, as you said, been a historic problem. Did you manage to find out exactly when these problems actually started, how deeply entrenched these illegal associations are? Because it really is a power structure and a power matrix in and of itself.
Well, the report in its very early pages in the introductions, it does make reference to the fact that in the mid-80s, in around 1980, during the apartheid government, there was a commission of inquiry almost similar to this in terms of what it was meant to do, its powers. And it recommended complete deregulation of the taxi industry. And also, just great disinterest from the taxi industry in the sense that there was a view that in the suburbs, in white communities, you don't need taxi industries. And post-1994, while government has done such a lot of work to try to manage the taxi industry and come close to it, but we all know, as the report indicates, that we could have actually done even much more better by tightly managing keeping very close to, and making sure that some of these problems do not grow their own or develop their own life, as we can see now. The taxi industry has also been threatened, taken over by a new industry within it, which is the killing machine, which is commonly known as the Nkabis. These are hitmen that get rented or hired. They are paid purely for killing, and they've grown into a fully fledged semi-industry within the taxi industry. They've got logistics, transport, gun supply, hideouts, and as the report indicates, they're also conniving, and they've got links with a network of people within our own department. You'll see the report is saying there are officials that the commission is saying we must deal with and hold criminally liable. There are those in law enforcement agencies. And so there's a web and network that has evolved in this killing machinery. And that's what the report is putting clearly on the table. And I think we are now in a much more stronger, better position than at any time in history to deal with the challenges of the taxi industry, modernize it, corporatize it, and make sure that this business model founded by historically oppressed people, Africans, and Black people in general, that this model could actually now be one of the best models of Black economic empowerment that can actually change the lives of the drivers, of the owners, but also make an impact across the economy and various commercial sites and activities.
Are you then saying, MEC, that this report reveals that there are two parallel structures that exist within the South African taxi industry? There is the legitimate transportation of commuters with registered businesses, that is official, recognized. And then there's also a parallel underground, almost a gangster taxi industry, which is made up of Inkabi. Is this what you're saying?
The concept of Inkabi is clearly stated in the report, is there. And it also indicates that there is a need to investigate money laundering, because the report clearly indicates that the Inkabis are paid by monies that are collected on methods that borders on money laundering. And it actually strongly says there's a need for investigative capacity that can follow the money that comes from taxi members, taxi associations, and then it goes to pay Inkabis, who are the hitmen and murderers. So in that case, it tells you. And it also says that these associations themselves pay the Inkabis. So it tells you that there is a market for killings. I mean, this is a very scary thing, really, that is happening within the taxi industry. There's a market for killing, and then there's a market in the sense that there's a demand for it, and there is supply for it, there's pricing, and the market seems to be flourishing at this point. The market operates, it's a well-known industry that is operating within the taxi industry, and it is eating the taxi industry, because I think when this thing started, they thought it was a small thing. Now it has grown, it's big, and it is threatening to eat the taxi associations itself. The report also makes a very interesting point that the Inkabis are not only paid cash, they are also paid by associations, making them members of the associations and allowing them to own taxis and to operate. So they are also being rewarded with association membership, and then they end up owning taxis. So you can imagine that those people will perpetuate the killings. They will actually even make sure that they get more. So this issue of Inkabis and evolving into almost a business model within the industry is something that is very clear, because the rate at which taxi people are being killed can only happen with a much more established logistics, clear industry that has got everything that it requires to execute heinous crimes. So that is clearly clear in the report, that the system, the practice, the Inkabis are actually at the core of eating the taxi industry, and that's what law enforcement need to deal with.
Now, MEC, looking at the report, it says here that it also reveals that the industry is controlled by quote-unquote powerful individuals who resist vacating their positions even when they have been voted out. Are these same powerful individuals the same individuals that are found leading Inkabi?
Well, the point you are raising, it's in the part that is called the operating model of the taxi associations. So it says that you have got associations that own cars and own actually combis, and these cars belong to associations. And then they don't queue, they don't stand in the queue. They do what is called reversing, which is to jump the queue basically. And the report says these taxis, whilst they are said to be belonging to associations, they actually belong to powerful men inside associations. And the money that these taxis are collecting is unaccounted for. Nobody knows where this money goes to. And the associations are operating under the pretext of being associations, taxes and money collected for them. So that underworld where there's no transparency, monies are collected, unaccounted for, no auditing, no final trade of what happened to the money. Certainly, those monies find their ways into financing all forms of illegal and criminal activity because they're unaccounted for. Where do they go to? And the report clearly states, Inkabis are paid by monies collected by associations. So the point it is making about powerful men running the associations of the taxis, of the associations, it's a matter that law enforcement, as recommended in the report, has to look at so that you separate corporate activities of the taxi industry from mutual, common, non-profit related interests of members.
You started touching on this a little bit, MEC, but perhaps let's go deeper into the recommendations that have been made and the way forward now for the Gauteng Department of Roads and Transport. What are you going to do about the findings that have come out of this report?
So the provincial government, led by our Premier David Makura, has actually directed us very clear as a department when we presented the report that first things first, we must go and develop a concrete plan of action. It should have clear timelines. It should be costed. We must know what it will take and cost the province to implement these recommendations. And to that extent, we will go back to cabinet. We have met with the two taxi associations, Santago in the province, the National Taxi Alliance in Gauteng, which we call GNTA, the Gauteng National Taxi Alliance. And we have met with them. We have agreed in 14 days from the day we released the report, we are meeting with them again to start to get feedback from them first. What is their take on the report? They've already said this report represents a qualitative achievement from July 2019 when we first had our provincial taxi summit. But they said, whilst they acknowledge that, there are a lot of things in the report they need to go study, carefully look at. Some of them they might have to get advice on. So we gave them 14 days. In 14 days, we are starting discussions on the roadmap, on the concrete plan as directed by the provincial government. Because if we don't take the taxi industry on board and work with them and be partners, it is definitely going to be difficult to implement these very important recommendations. We also need a Minister of Transport, Honorable Fikile Mbalula, in the context of the provincial and national taxi mahotas that were held, to also say what is their input and guidance on the implementation of the report. So to that extent, we will come back to the people of Gauteng, to the people of our province and say, this is the roadmap, the direction we are taking in partnership with the taxi industry, supported by Minister of Transport.
And I guess crime intelligence and SAPS is also one key stakeholder that you will be engaging with in the process moving ahead.
The commission itself has clearly said that the provincial commissioner General Mawela must actually oversee some of the key issues that relate to law enforcement. I must also commend General Mawela, our most highly respected provincial commissioner, who already issued a statement same day that we released the report, actually welcoming the report, making an absolute commitment to implement its recommendations. And to that extent, I think he has already laid the basis, particularly with the critical aspect of law enforcement. I think General Mawela should be commended for upfront, instead of being in denial, arguing, being defensive. He says, we're going to implement this and move forward. And he is already doing some of the work, has moved on. So law enforcement, critical component of this report, and the general is leading by example, and we're deeply, deeply delighted about that.
MEC Jacob Mamabolo, thank you very much for your time and the report back this evening. That's MEC for Roads and Transport in Gauteng, giving us feedback on the Commission of Inquiry into taxi violence in Gauteng, really sounding like the makings of a riveting crime novel.